When I bought the charming lakeside home in Willow Bend Estates, all I wanted was peace and a quiet place to sip coffee by the water. But that all changed the day Charlotte Grayson, the head of the neighborhood HOA, showed up on my porch in her crisp blazer and pearls, demanding a key to the private gate I had just installed. "You're blocking community lake access," she snapped, her heels digging into the cobblestone path like she owned the place. I tried to stay calm. "That path runs through my land, Charlotte. It's private property. It's in the deed." She smiled, tight, fake, with eyes that said trouble was coming. "Then we'll see what the board has to say about that." I had no idea this simple gate would lead to late-night trespassers, hidden cameras, and a stunning discovery of embezzlement and fraud that reached deep into our so-called perfect community. What started as a dispute over a padlock would soon unravel a web of lies that had cost homeowners thousands, and nearly cost me everything. And the woman threatening me? She had a lot more to hide than just bad intentions. 3 nights after Charlotte Grayson demanded access to my private gate, I was jolted awake by a buzzing phone notification. Motion detected backyard camera. I fumbled to unlock the app, and what I saw made my blood run cold. 3 figures stood near the gate in the moonlight: Charlotte, Grant Bellamy, the HOA treasurer, and Marcus Wynn, the maintenance manager. Grant held a pair of glinting bolt cutters. I watched, horrified, as they examined my padlock like burglars casing a job. Without hesitation, I hit record and dialed 911. By the time Officer Riley arrived, they were gone, but the lock bore deep scratches, and footprints marked the soil. "You've got a solid case for attempted break-in," the officer said, scribbling notes, "especially with the video and eyewitness footage." I nodded, still in disbelief. "Those people are on the HOA board. You'd be surprised what folks in power think they can get away with," he muttered. The next morning, my mailbox overflowed with 5 violation notices: improper hedge height, unauthorized lighting, unapproved mailbox paint, non-regulation garden borders, and, ironically, illegal gate modifications. Each came with a $100 per day fine. It was coordinated, vengeful, and it was just the beginning. My inbox was already full with concerned messages from neighbors I barely knew. "Did you really block lake access? Why are there police at your house?" Worse, on the community app, Charlotte had posted a smug update: "Resident violates long-standing tradition of shared lake access. Board will address at tonight's emergency meeting." I knew I couldn't go unarmed, figuratively. I called Mark Heller, my attorney, and headed straight to the county clerk's office. That's where everything shifted. The clerk raised an eyebrow when I explained my situation. "Willow Bend HOA again, huh?" she whispered. "You're not the first." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They've been trying to reclassify private lakefront lots as shared access for years. They've even submitted zoning map changes. Rejected every time, of course." She printed the original survey maps, deed records, and zoning documentation. There it was in black and white. The lake path was fully within my property line. No easement, no access rights. All legal. All mine. Armed with the documents and video, I returned home to find something that made my heart sink. A brand new padlock had been installed on my gate by the HOA. They'd broken mine and replaced it with theirs, leaving a note: "Community access restored. Contact the HOA for your key." I stood there, stunned, grocery bags hanging from my arms. This was blatant criminal trespass and destruction of property. Done in the open. Done with full confidence that they could get away with it. I wasn't just fighting over a gate anymore. This had become a war, and I was about to take the first real swing. At exactly 6:45 p.m., the clubhouse parking lot was packed, cars stretching down the street like it was a town hall on election night. But this wasn't democracy. This was an ambush. I arrived with Mark Heller, my attorney, carrying a folder filled with security footage, county documents, and the HOA's own rules, which they had repeatedly broken. Inside, the crowd was buzzing. Neighbors whispered and turned in their seats as Charlotte Grayson spotted us from across the room. Her eyes widened, but the smile stayed. It was a politician's smile, all teeth, no warmth. "This is a private homeowners meeting," she said into the microphone. Outside parties aren't permitted. My client is a homeowner, Mark replied smoothly, and HOA bylaws grant them the right to attend. I'm here as legal counsel. And before any official business occurs, let's address the elephant in the room. This emergency meeting violates your own 2-week notice rule. Anything voted on tonight? Legally invalid. Charlotte's confidence faltered for just a second before she motioned to Grant Bellamy. He whispered something to her and quickly slipped out the side door. Across the room, I saw Grace Tilley, my elderly neighbor, standing near the back, visibly nervous. She mouthed, "They're lying." I gave her a subtle nod. Charlotte stepped up again. "We're here to discuss the illegal privatization of a shared lake path, a feature that has been accessible to our community for decades. This homeowner has unilaterally blocked access, hurting property values and violating HOA spirit." She clicked the projector, and a massive photo of my gate appeared with red circles drawn around the lock and a caption, "Obstruction of community access." Gasps. Murmurs. One man shook his head. Another muttered, "I thought it was public land." I stood. That image? Taken on my private property. The lock? Installed by me legally. And I have the deed, survey maps, and zoning records to prove it. I held up the folder. "You've all been told this land was shared. It's not. The HOA has been lying to you." "Enough," Charlotte snapped. "This is community business." Then the clubhouse doors flew open and Officer Riley entered, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "We're here to speak with Charlotte Grayson, Grant Bellamy, and Marcus Wynn regarding a report of property destruction and criminal trespassing." The room exploded in whispers. Charlotte tried to keep her composure. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, voice shaking slightly. "This is about a community path." "No, ma'am," Officer Riley interrupted. "This is about evidence of trespassing and tampering with private security systems. You were caught on surveillance footage." From the back, Grace's frail voice rang out. "They cut the lock. I watched from my garden window. I have the recording." Suddenly, this wasn't about a gate anymore. This was a criminal investigation. As Charlotte was led out in stunned silence, I felt something shift in the room. Eyes that had once looked at me with suspicion now looked with curiosity and maybe guilt. I didn't need to convince anyone anymore. The truth was beginning to speak for itself. The next morning, I stepped outside expecting relief, but the silence that greeted me felt heavier than the shouts from the night before. No more HOA notices taped to my door, no neighbors glaring from behind bushes. But also no hellos. No waves. Just quiet. I poured a mug of coffee and sat on the porch watching the early sun glitter off Pinecrest Lake, the very view that had once felt like a dream. Now it felt like the front line of a war zone. I wasn't sure what I expected, maybe a flood of apologies or neighbors thanking me for standing up, but instead there was a strange discomfort in the air. Like the truth had cracked something open and no one knew how to handle it. Just before noon, a knock on the door startled me. It was Thomas Green, the quiet accountant from 2 streets over. He was holding a worn-out manila folder and looking like he hadn't slept. "I went through my old HOA paperwork," he said. "I found this." Inside were years of financial summaries, not full statements, just vague totals and expenses with little explanation. But one-line items stood out again and again. "Lake access maintenance, $5,000 annually. For your gate," Thomas said grimly. "They've been billing us all for it." My throat tightened. "But it's never been community property." He nodded. "They lied. And we paid for it. Every year." Just then, Grace walked up the driveway holding a basket of muffins, her hands shaking. "I kept minutes from every HOA meeting for the last 5 years, she said. I didn't know if it mattered, but now I think it does." That afternoon, we spread it all out across my dining room table, financial notes, HOA minutes, blurry photos, and the security footage from my cameras. Layer by layer, the picture sharpened. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about everyone. By evening, the tension that had once filled my street with fear had turned into something else, momentum. I opened my front door to find Sophia Morales, a mom of 2 from down the street. "I heard what happened," she said, nervously wringing her hands. "They rejected our fence twice. But when we used Marcus Wynn's cousin's company, it was suddenly approved." Behind her was Derek Shaw, whose wife had been fined $300 for hanging a wreath with non-neutral tones. "We thought it was just us," he said quietly. "Turns out we were all targets." That night, I hosted the first unofficial Reclaim the HOA meeting in my backyard. 12 people showed up. Some brought snacks. Others brought stories. And every single one of them brought rage wrapped in resignation until now. The very people who once gave me the cold shoulder were now ready to fight alongside me. This wasn't just my battle anymore. It was ours. And for the first time since this started, I realized something. This gate wasn't a boundary. It was a beginning. 3 days later, a group of us stood outside the Maple Springs Community Center, a place that once felt intimidating, but now felt like the perfect battleground for what came next. Armed with documents, video footage, and the will of a dozen angry neighbors, we weren't just residents anymore. We were a movement. The special HOA meeting had been moved up again. Another last-ditch attempt by Jennifer to push through community enforcement upgrades. But we all knew what it really was, a cover-up. Inside, the room buzzed with tension. Jennifer stood at the front table, flanked by Robert and Michael, all of them dressed as if the right blazer could hide the rot beneath. "Before we begin," she said with a tight smile, "I'd like to remind everyone that disruptive behavior will not be tolerated." That's when Thomas Green stood up. Quiet, unassuming Thomas. But tonight, he had fire in his voice. "We'd like to add a new item to the agenda," he said, holding up a signed petition. "Per Section 9B of the bylaws, we're requesting a vote to dissolve the current board and hold immediate emergency elections." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jennifer's jaw clenched. "That's not how this works," she snapped. "It is," Grace said, rising beside him. "I've attended every board meeting for the last 5 years. Section 9B hasn't been used in decades, but it's still binding." The audience erupted in murmurs. Jennifer looked to Robert, who nodded faintly. He knew she was cornered. Just as things teetered on the edge of chaos, the doors at the back of the room opened, and in walked Detective Marvin Reynolds. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, voice calm but commanding. "We're here to serve subpoenas for financial documents connected to the HOA board, as requested by the district attorney's office." He approached the board table, handing out legal envelopes one by one. "This is harassment," Jennifer hissed. "You can't do this in a private meeting." "This isn't just a private meeting anymore," I said, rising from my seat. "It's a crime scene in progress." More neighbors stood up beside me. Sophia, Derek, Grace, even Marcus Wynn, the local contractor once loyal to the board. One by one, they raised their hands to demand a vote. And for the first time, Jennifer had no power left to wield. The vote passed in a landslide, 58 homeowners in favor of dissolving the current board. 3 opposed. Jennifer, Robert, and Michael sat frozen, pale and speechless. As people clapped and hugged and exhaled months of fear, I stepped outside for air. The night was cool, and the lake shimmered in the distance. The gate had opened. Not just mine, but a gate for the entire neighborhood, to healing, to truth, to taking back what belonged to them. And tomorrow we'd vote on a brand new board. One that would serve the people, not control them. By the time the next morning arrived, my name had made its way through every street in Maple Springs. Not as the difficult homeowner or gate girl, but as the person who stood up when no one else could. I'd gone to bed feeling exhausted but proud. Now, as sunlight filtered through my kitchen window and birds chirped by the lake, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. And purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Board elections at noon. You're nominated. You ready?" Ready? A week ago, I would have laughed at the idea. Me? On the HOA board? But now, I couldn't imagine walking away. Not after what I'd seen. Not after everything we'd uncovered. I arrived early at the community center, greeted by neighbors with nods and smiles. Some handed me coffee. Others just words of thanks. Even Mr. Culver, who once accused me of ruining the neighborhood vibe, shook my hand. "You were right," he muttered almost sheepishly. "We were blind. You opened our eyes." That simple moment hit me harder than any speech could have. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. For the first time, this meeting belonged to the people. No gavel pounding to silence questions. No smug grins from a board that thought itself above the rules. Just concerned homeowners determined to build something better. The interim administrator took the mic. "We've had more nominations than ever before," she smiled. "Each candidate gets 2 minutes to speak. Let's start with Jamie Larkins." I swallowed hard and stood. My palms were sweaty, my heart thudding. I didn't ask for any of this, I began. I just wanted to protect what was mine. But what we learned, is that corruption doesn't care about property lines. It hides behind polite smiles and fine print. People nodded. But what we did together, sharing stories, uncovering truth, and demanding change, that's what community really is. I took a breath. If elected, I won't let power go to my head. I'll make sure every homeowner gets transparency, fairness, and a voice. No more secret votes. No more retaliatory fines. Just the simple truth and the peace of knowing your home is safe. Applause rose around the room. That afternoon, the votes were counted. I was elected board president by a 72% majority. Grace and Thomas joined as treasurer and secretary. 3 more neighbors filled the remaining seats, each one bringing their own story of past mistreatment and new resolve. We got to work immediately. We called for an independent audit of the HOA's finances, hired a third-party mediator to review all past violations, and created a new digital portal where any homeowner could see exactly how dues were spent. And that path to the lake? We left it gated. But we built a new, public access point complete with benches, recycling bins, and signs reminding visitors to respect the land and each other. It was more than a fix. It was a symbol of how far we'd come and how far we could go together. Spring came early to Maple Springs that year. As cherry blossoms fluttered down like confetti onto our freshly mulched sidewalks and kids zipped past on scooters, the neighborhood looked almost untouched by the storm it had just endured. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. On the first Saturday of April, we held our very first Community Unity Day, a new event the board voted to implement unanimously. Tables were set up along the new lake access point, which was no longer my path, but a fully renovated community entrance complete with a kayak rack, picnic benches, and native plants that Grace personally selected. Neighbors brought food, shared stories, and smiled without suspicion. I sat under a canopy with a clipboard, helping new homeowners sign up for committees, real ones with real power, not just names for HOA letterhead. Behind me, a large corkboard displayed photos from our journey, security footage, news clippings, court summaries. Above it, in bold black letters, "Truth grows where transparency lives." Grace wandered over with 2 paper cups of lemonade. "Remember the day you called me shaking after the first notice?" she asked, smiling. "You've come a long way, Jamie." I looked around at the laughter, the freedom, the trust returning to people's eyes. I had come a long way. But so had we all. It wasn't just me, I said. "You kept notes." Thomas asked the hard questions. Tyler caught them on camera. This was a group effort. She raised her lemonade to the gate that opened more than just a path. I clinked my cup to hers. Later that day, a young couple approached me by the dock. They just moved into the house Jennifer used to own. Nervously, they asked about HOA rules, scared from stories they'd heard. I handed them a welcome packet. "Everything's here," I said gently. "And if anything ever feels unfair, come find me. You don't need to be afraid anymore." They both looked relieved. That's when I realized the true win. Not the board seat, not the new path, not even the criminal convictions. It was the culture shift. Fear had once kept our neighbors silent, compliant, and divided. Now courage bound us together. As the sun dipped low and cast golden ripples across the lake, I walked back up to my house, past my perfectly trimmed hedges, my mailbox painted the approved shade of forest green, and my still-locked private gate. Not because I had to keep people out, but because it reminded me of the day I decided to fight back. And the day a neighborhood woke up. Before going inside, I turned around and looked out across the lake. The path sparkled in the setting sun. A little boy ran past, his kite bobbing in the wind, and for a moment I saw myself, not just the homeowner who stood her ground, but the woman who opened doors when the world tried to close them. And that made all the battles worth it. Sometimes what seems like a small inconvenience, a locked gate, a violation notice, can be the crack that exposes the rot beneath the surface. We often assume the systems governing us are fair, that the people enforcing the rules do so with integrity. But when rules become weapons and silence becomes expected, that's not order, it's oppression. The real courage lies not in fighting alone, but in rallying others, in shining a light into the dark corners of unchecked power. True communities aren't built on compliance, but on compassion, transparency, and shared accountability. When Jamie stood up to the HOA's threats, she didn't just defend her property. She defended the idea that no one, no matter how powerful, should be allowed to manipulate, threaten, or deceive. Justice didn't come from shouting louder, it came from documentation, persistence, and standing together. And sometimes the key to change is a lock no one else has the courage to challenge. If you live in a community governed by an HOA, read the bylaws, even the boring parts. Understand your rights. Ask questions. Save all communications and document violations or harassment. If something feels off, trust your instincts and seek legal advice. Most importantly, talk to your neighbors. You'd be surprised how many share your frustrations. Corruption thrives in silence and isolation, but it falls apart under collaboration. Whether it's fighting for a fence, garden, or privacy, your voice matters. And if you ever feel outmatched, remember, one well-documented truth is often stronger than 1,000 whispered lies.